Where do we start? Where to start, my lovelies? I have a tale of several lizards for you today. I had planned on recording this episode yesterday, and I was ready. I had the story that you're about to hear all queued up and ready to go, and it just didn't work out timing-wise. There were other things that were going on that I addressed instead of recording. And I was feeling a little bit bad about it this morning. I was like, damn, I said I was going to do this thing, and then I didn't do this thing, and let's beat myself up gently about it, but I was still beating myself up. And then something happened, which I'll get to at the end of this story, that made it all make sense. I just want to say here, and I'll reiterate this after we're done with the story, that things happen in the time that they're supposed to happen. And God, the universe, unconscious, great spirit, whatever you want to call it, has a very different clock than the human mind can even begin to understand. And trusting that clock is a constant process. Trusting that these things are coming, everything is working out in the way that it's supposed to, and the best thing that we can do is let go of the roots on the side of the river and let the river take us and follow that flow of energy. So, here's my story. And I want to start this out with a bit of a trigger warning. There are dead lizards in this story. So if that is not your bag today, feel free to come back to this episode when you feel a little bit more resourced to navigate that particular part of the cycle of life. So, welcome to Squeaky's Cauldron. I'm your host, Sarah Evergreen. I do coaching and stuff, and this is our cozy little spot to get together and have me whisper into your ears sweet nothings. So sweet. I am recording this podcast from my bed in Tucson. I am sky-clad, as the hippie witches say, having just had a beautiful conversation with my partner. A beautiful, sexy conversation with my partner. So you get that energy still moving around in the space. So lucky you. Lizards. Let's talk about lizards. I came to Tucson about 2 months ago to do this extended house sitting gig. There's something about the desert, y'all. It's, I think it's harder for death to hide here than in other places that I've lived. Like out in the Pacific Northwest, for example, there's so many places for death to hide. Under a bush or behind a tree or being just reclaimed by the land, really. Whereas in the desert, there's a lot more open space. There's a lot more ability to see the death that takes place on a daily basis. That is a big part of this story. The very first full day that I spent at this house, I opened the back door, and the back door leads on to this beautiful covered patio and a little garden area that is kept alive by an automatic irrigation system, because that's kind of what you have to do in the desert. So I open up the back door, and right there on the threshold is a lizard. And I'm like, oh shit, there's a lizard. Cool. And then I'm like, that lizard's not moving. That lizard should have run away when I opened the door. That lizard is dead? But, my friends, it did not look dead. It looked like it had, like you might see a lizard lounging on a rock, just kicking it. Like its tail was curled around perfectly. It didn't look like it had been trying to run away from something or hide from something, like the cat, for example. It was just there, except that its head was down. And I got a little freaked out. And I decided, best course of action is to ignore this. Maybe that actually is alive. I don't know. So I did. I ignored it. And the next day I came out and ignored it for another day. And the day after that, I came out. At this point, I was making all sorts of rationalizations in my head about, like, I don't know where a shovel is, because I'm going to bury the thing. I don't know, this or that. You know, all the excuses that we can come up with for not doing the thing that we really know that we should do. And then the third day, I opened the door and the motherfucker's head is up off the ground. And I'm like, what the actual, like, what is happening? This is definitely a dead lizard. I'd seen a fly crawling on it. This is a very dead lizard. Why is its head up? And it kept its head up all day. And then the next day when I came out, its head was back on the ground. And shortly after that, I had a conversation with Heisem. And he was like, okay, you go, you do this thing. And I went and I did the thing and I buried it. And buried it at the foot of this strange and beautiful goddess sculpture in the backyard. And I thought, okay, look at that. I did the thing. It took me 4 days, but I did the thing. Good for me. Yay. Pat myself on the back. Great. Okay. Then, later, maybe a couple of weeks later, 3 weeks later, the cat is making some noises at the back door, wanting in. And I open the door and I see another lizard in the threshold of the door. And it looks like it's been disemboweled. And I'm like, this fucking cat. Okay, got another dead lizard to deal with. No big deal. Like, I can do this. And I went and got a paper towel to pick it up. And right before I put the towel on the lizard, I had this thought, you need to check. And it turns out that the lizard was not dead. And what I thought was its innards was, after a fashion, its innards, but was actually like lizard eggs. It had been giving birth when it got disrupted by the cat. And it was obviously incredibly freaked out, probably in a lot of pain, absolutely a lot of anxiety. And when I tried to catch it so that I could put it outside, it took off and ran into the house. And eventually I did manage to, like, get the cat inside and get the lizard outside, but there'd been a lot of stress, and the lizard ended up dying, and its eggs, which there'd been some attached to it and some also left in the exact same spot that the other lizard had died. There were 2 eggs, and they didn't look viable. So, now knowing where a shovel was, I picked up the dead mama lizard and I picked up her eggs, and I went to go bury them and noticed that there were 2 more eggs and another dead lizard on the steps. In places where I should have seen them as I was going to get the shovel, as I was going to dig the hole. These are places that I passed like 2 or 3 times and did not see until that exact moment. And they weren't lizard eggs, these eggs. There was some kind of bird egg and then another egg that I couldn't identify, but did not look like the lizard's eggs. So I took the lizards, I took the eggs, and I buried them all again at the foot of this goddess. And I thought that I had gotten all of the eggs, and that all of the eggs weren't viable, which proved to be wrong about 3 days later when I find the cat, again the cat, playing with a little baby, like so tiny baby lizard in the back area. The cat got the lizard, so I had nothing to bury, but also, yeah, another dead lizard on my watch. Okay, fast forward to about a week ago, and I've gone through all of this process with these lizards, with the eggs and everything, and there's been a lot of stuff going on in the rest of my life that has been kind of mirroring a lot of this energy. I remember there was some element of sacrifice and creating something new. This was when I was creating my course and getting that ready to go. Just a little plug for the Lilith Factor Sex Magic 101 course. We're just over halfway through the first round of it, and it's fucking amazing. And I'm sure in part that it's because there was this sacrifice on the part of the lizards and my honoring of it. Because this is the thing, that nature will give us these signs, these energies, all of these things that we can tap into if we are aware of and choose to honor it. And that's the process, aware of and honoring. And honoring often means taking action, even if that's just saying a prayer of thanks and recognition, or burying a dead animal, or offering tobacco and water, which I did to this goddess statue. I offered tobacco and water after I buried these lizards. It's these little moments of connection to something bigger that clears the way for wild things to happen, including just this course being so amazing. If you are interested in this course, do reach out and I can put you on my newsletter and keep you updated as to when the next round is going to go out. So, yes, fast forward to a little over a week ago. Again, I open the door and find a lizard on the threshold. Because this cat is incorrigible, and lizards apparently don't care about bells like the birds do. By the way, this cat also killed a bird the one day I forgot to put his collar on. He was out there an hour. It brings me a bird. Anyway, that also got buried by the goddess. So there's this lizard, again, in the threshold, and I'm like, what the fuck? And I go through all the motions, again, a little bit less freaked out this time. It didn't have eggs hanging out of it. I go through the motions to like try to catch it. It runs into another room. I try to get it into a box. I'm talking to it the entire time, like, hey, I'm just trying to help, as one does. And eventually it runs out and hides underneath the freezer that's there by the back door. And I'm like, well, I'm definitely not going to get it out of there. So I guess we just have to, okay, it's in the house. It's probably going to die because it's freaked out, and such is life. So I decided to look up, what does it mean when a lizard comes into your house? What is the particular spiritual medicine of a lizard? And here's what I came up with. First of all, a lizard entering into your house is supposed to mean that there are new beginnings coming. I'm not sure exactly where this originates from, but I can understand the thought process behind that particular statement. Lizards shed. That's one of their main features. Every 2 to 4 times a year, they will shed their skin and be renewed in this way. This is, what we have to do as well in order to continue to move forward, in order to grow, in order to step into new places in our lives, new identities, new ways of being. We have to be willing and able to shed old identities, to shed old habits, to shed old patterns, and to let them go without sentimentality, without being maudlin about it. I mean, we can grieve, we should grieve. There's a difference between grieving and grasping. Another thing that lizards do is they self-amputate to escape predators. So you've probably seen this or heard about this at least, is that the lizard can detach their tail. And it's a very well attached tail, and they have the capability of just, in the blink of an eye, basically, saying, okay, nope, this thing, this big scary thing, has got me cornered or has got my tail a bit or something, and I'm going to get rid of it. And I'm going to go forward without my tail. And I'm going to leave my tail behind as bait, or, this thing that this animal can then do with what it will. And I'll regrow my tail. This too speaks to the ability, the necessity to release that which is caught by something bigger than us that we no longer want to be a part of. So, for example, leaving how about, for example, going through divorce? When my husband and I split up, there was a lot of tails that I had to release, and quickly. I had to release my house. I had to release the identity of being a wife. Those are just two that, come to the top of my head. These are things that we quickly release, let go, and that if we keep holding on to them, makes us easier prey, rather, to something bigger than us. The lizard is a creature of adaptation, change, and speed. The quickness with which it can release its tail, as well as the quickness with which it moves, just generally. It's about these rapid transformations, rapid changes. And I've seen so much of that come through since I started encountering this lizard medicine being here in Tucson. Which leads me to a couple of days ago. I had just come inside and I'd closed the screen door. And then I closed the main door. And I was on the phone with my best friend at that moment. We were talking about something spiritual and great and fun, and the back door was closing oddly, and I looked down, and there was a lizard in the door. I had pretty much decapitated the thing with the edge of the door. This harbinger of change, this adaptive animal that brought forth the message of let the thing go that needs to be let go. And I just murdered it in my back door. It was quite a moment, and I'm very grateful to my friend for staying on the phone with me while I navigated that moment, while I got some paper towels and picked up the body and set it outside so that I could bury it later. And he said to me in that moment, not every dead lizard is an omen. Not every dead lizard is an omen. Yeah. And I'm going to be releasing a video about signs and synchronicities and omens and whatnot on Monday. So if you want a little bit more of a, practical exploration of this idea and talking about reading signs and this kind of thing, do check that out. I'm pretty sure it'll go on premiere on Friday or Saturday, depending on, my editing schedule. Not every dead lizard is an omen. But, or maybe and, some dead lizards are. And what exactly that omen is, I don't know. What I gathered from my experience, which I'll lead us into the last step of it, or at least the last step that I'm aware of. What I have gathered is that this is all a process, and while that dead lizard in that moment felt like I had murdered my change, I think that there's a bigger message, and that when we have that faith in the timing, we have that faith in the unfolding, we can hold space for that message to come through when it's ready to come through. So this morning, again, I went to the fated threshold of the back door, and the cat was meowing to be let in. I opened the door, and there was another lizard on the threshold. It had crawled up into the same spot that the mama lizard had crawled into, but it was very clearly alive because it was about halfway up the door frame at that point. Like, its body was halfway up and halfway on the ground, and it was clearly alive. And I was like, fuck. And I yelled at the cat a little. He's such a troublemaker. And when I went to try to figure out what I was going to do with it exactly, it darted into the house and went into hiding behind a little shelf that's right next to the door. So I let the cat in and threw the cat into one of the bedrooms, shut the door, so that he could do his own thing and not mess with this poor lizard. And then I got a feather duster and I started poking around where the lizard was, and eventually herded it right back outside and out into nature, where it could live the rest of its probably short and violent life the way it was meant to live, not being killed by a cat inside of a stucco house. I did the thing that over and over and over again I had been unable to do. And I did it in part because I had been training over and over and over of what to do, what not to do, how to do it, what perspective to take, what energy to take on, what posture to assume as I moved through this particular situation. And not every dead lizard is an omen, but every dead lizard can be a lesson, can be a way to grow. One of the other things that has happened in the midst of this particular story that's unfolded since I got here is meeting someone who I knew immediately that this person was not going to be resonant with me, and still I entered into a friendship with them. And if you've listened to the last episode of the podcast, My Dance with the Devil, you'll already know this story. But it was 2 months of feeling like I was being used as a receptacle, trauma dumped, among other things, disrespected, which eventually led to me shedding the fear, shedding the desire to people please, shedding my fawning response to this kind of big energy, and standing up for myself in a calm, grounded way, and finding that I had actually been dealing with an energy that I'm very, very familiar with, and starting to come into these concepts of demon possession and entities and such that I'm still working out, so I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole right now, but I do see that coming in the future. Anywho, yeah, so that was a big shedding and a big, like, I'm going to release my tail to get away from this big baddie, which was not the individual. I want to make that very clear. It was not this person specifically. It was the energy that had been attached to them through trauma and dealing with narcissistic behavior in the past. So that's my lizard story. I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on it. If you have any of your own experiences with lizards that you'd like to share. If you are listening to this on YouTube, go ahead and drop a comment. If you're on your favorite podcast app, please just reach out. It's squeakiescauldron@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And again, if you are interested in keeping up to date on stuff that's going on in the cauldron, you can sign up to my newsletter. The link for that will be in the show notes. And you can also, go follow me on Instagram. I've been more active over there lately. It's at Queen Sarah Evergreen. That link will also be in the show notes as well, so you don't have to remember it right now. So, until next time, my lovelies, take care of your lizards, take care of yourselves, and as always, use your voice.